This video is about getting students to engage with the content that you give them for the course. The main content types include readings, videos, and virtual class meetings, or when we go back face-to-face, in-person class meetings. Whenever you're thinking about what kind of content you want to give to the students to interact with, readings, videos, class meetings, you want to make sure that what you're giving them relates clearly to one or more of the learning outcomes that you've written. We all know that getting students to truly interact with the content, whether it's reading something at all, or reading it critically, or reading it and thinking about it, or reading it and applying it, can be a difficult task. The same goes for watching videos or taking good lecture notes and using them. Meaning-making activities can be very useful to get students to truly engage with the content that you're giving them. And a meaning-making activity is something that you ask the students to do that requires that they immediately use the material. This moves them from passive absorption to active use and really requires really that they engage with the material directly. Asking them to use the material also gives them a way to assess their own understanding. They know that this is a priority for you, and it gives them a center point to think about what they've been looking at or reading or listening to. So how do you make exploring the content actually count? How do you make students want to do it? Any meaning-making activity should be connected to a learning outcome directly and explicitly, so students know what they're really trying to do and why it matters. It should help students understand what it is that they have been reading or watching or listening to. And they should have an incentive. These should be counted. They should be low stakes graded, but they should still be graded because students have complex lives with a lot of different expectations coming at them, and they need a reason that this has to be one of their priorities. Meaning-making activities should be useful to you for formative assessment, so you can see what students got out of that content and see what they're still struggling with. As in the previous slide, it should also be useful to the students for formative assessment. It should help them understand what they do and do not understand, and eventually give them a path forward to better understanding. They should also be useful to students for summative assessments. The skills, techniques, knowledge that they gain through the meaning-making activities should come in handy later when they're doing a summative assessment, whether they're directly doing that activity that they did in the meaning-making activity or not. Once you start thinking about developing meaning-making activities, you can think of them as two really big groups. The first one is thinking about asking them to explore the content that they have to look at before class. For these readings and videos and so on, you want to have some sort of immediate formative assessment. These can be in the form of some sort of short assignment, like a short answer writing or a quick calculation or an in-video quiz. Any of these will work, something that they can do in 15, 20 minutes max after they've done their reading or watched a video to make it concrete in their own heads. This is also a great place for a multiple choice quiz, low stakes, automatically graded in Moodle. You can also wrap these into later summative assessments. When you connect the quick pre-class work to later summative assessment, You double their power. You want to make the connection explicit so that they understand the value of the early meaning making activities and how they lead to your later summative assessment. You also want to, in the summative assessment, reference the content that you want them to refer back to. So make it clear what class content they're coming back to, what pre-class activities they did that will help them with the summative assessment. So how do you get students to engage in the material presented during class? How do you get them to come to a virtual meeting when they know that they can look at the video afterwards? You want to make attending class as valuable to students as concretely as possible. They're certainly gaining knowledge when they sit and listen to a lecture, but how that works for them and how to focus and how to think about the material may not be apparent to a new student or even an experienced student. And if they can watch it on tape later, why should they be there in person? You want to evaluate the pre-class work before the class. If you have an auto-grading multiple choice, this is easy. You can also use a rubric to look at short assignments. A simple rubric for a low-stakes assignment can be really quick to grade, gives you a lot of feedback, and gives the students some immediate feedback as well. And then when you get to class, you can discuss common successes and issues that students had in the pre-class assignment. You can even discuss the common successes when not everybody was successful by explaining how and where those people who didn't quite get it can look at the material again. Talking about the issues is the bigger part of it. This helps students understand the content better, and it helps them, again, learn how they can go back and revise. You can also do meaning-making activities in the class, in between sections of lecture. You want to make it as valuable as possible for students to actually come to class. Whether this is a virtual class where they can watch the recording later or a face-to-face class where they can get the notes, being there should have some immediate payoff. One of the easiest ways to do this is to design an active learning activity to be done in class. This activity can build on the activity they did for the pre-class work by extending it or doing another example, particularly one that addresses some of the misunderstandings students had in the pre-class work. You can create an active learning activity that extends their knowledge or the use of the material. A more complicated example, calculation, drawing. Or you can add one that looks at other critical areas that you weren't able to address in the pre-class meaning-making activity that you know students tend to have difficulty with. The most common concern I have from faculty about doing active learning in class is time and having enough time to lecture. And this can be a concern, but often you'll find that a meaning-making activity, an active learning activity in class can replace some of the lecture. In some cases, it can shorten and improve student understanding of that particular item. This is something you'll have to try to figure out what the best balance is. Overall, the purpose of all of this is to help students learn how to become experts in your subject matter area. It helps them understand how to learn, what they should be looking at, and forces them to think about the pieces of your course in a deeper way. They don't know how to be subject matter experts yet. And so many of these activities guide them through that process and teach them how to do that so that they can do it more readily on their own in the future. If you have any questions about the content of this video, feel free to email us at moodlehelp@berkshirecc.edu.